I'm curious. I mean, when this came your way, how much did you know about what it would be? Did you have scripts? Do you get all the scripts with something like this?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of want to. No, is the answer. I mean, some of the other actors were quite maybe had read Jilly's book, I think, and were really aware of who Jilly Cooper was and tonally what kind of books she had written and she writes. I wasn't so much. I kind of knew the greater sort of picture of Jilly Cooper and I think roughly what kind of genre her books may have fallen into, but I hadn't read any before, so it was all new to me. And then how did it work out for us? I think I just met with Dominic Treadwell Collins, our showrunner, Laura Wade, one of our writers, and Elliot Hegarty, our first director. I met I think we had lunch before I had read anything. And we just talked about it. And they said, like, can we send you this? And then I think I read it and we met again. And I told them that I loved it and I want to be part of it. And then I think I got more scripts. I think it went along those kind of lines. But yeah, it was early for me. I was kind of, they thought of me early, which was quite nice. I wasn't an afterthought, which I wouldn't mind either. I'd love to be in Jilly Cooper's world anyway, but it was nice to be one of the first ones in the door.
Yeah, it's an interesting series because, it sort of starts off in this big way. Like, what the kind of show you're going to be watching is, but at the same time, some of the characters that are in it, like, you get eased into it with some of them. Like, you don't know who they're going to be until a couple episodes in. And I thought that was interesting. And so I was curious if you even knew like what you were fully.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that because I do remember reading the first couple of episodes and particularly the first episode and just getting a sense of how well-rounded all the characters were. Sometimes you read a script, maybe it's some of the scripts that aren't so good, but you're going back, who's this guy again? Who's the...
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and your skin. There's no cause for that at all with Jilly's. I mean, you know who the characters are. The names almost, as soon as you hear the name or read the name, you're reminded of this character that's in your head now. So I think that's a real testament to her writing. I mean, it's something she does really well, is write very definitive characters.
There are sort of dual layers to this guy. I mean, there's the family man aspect, but then there's also this TV guy who's good at tearing people down. So which side of him did you start with? Did you start with the aspects of him that you identified with most and then work out from there? Like, how did you approach this guy?
That's interesting. I don't know if I've ever broken things up into like, let's try, what's the police part of his life first, and then we'll do the family. I think it's just, it's just all encompassing, I suppose. There was something that really attracted me to Declan was that he has a family, he's a dad. And in the last few years, I've become a dad. So I suppose I understood, and he's very much a part of his life, even though he would say, shamefully, regretfully, he doesn't spend enough time with his kids or at home or in the family, so to speak. But it's very much a part of who he is. And, I think there's something about, you can always imagine what it's like to be a parent, and you can be around friends who are parents, and you can be lucky enough to still have your parents around, but to be a parent yourself, it just feels different. It just does. I mean, I guess there's something grounding about Declan that I didn't have to fight for. It was just kind of in me now or something, I didn't have to reach so hard for it. It's just sort of who I am. And of course, he's Irish too. And I base a lot of the character around my dad, the way he looked and sounded in the 80s. He's still around. But I remember my dad in the 80s, and I remember particularly in the 90s, and he had a big moustache like Declan's, and his physicality is something I based Declan's character on too, and the sound of his voice, his accent, and those kind of things. So, and then it was simultaneously I was watching, just old dusty BBC interviews from the 70s and from the 80s and like, William F. Buckley's Firing Line and all these different shows you can get so easily on YouTube and different sources. So I just got a real sense of what these long form interviews were like. People really took their time. They weren't interrupted so much. You really had to have your ducks in a row and you were given this time to speak. And Declan does that, but I think he's also kind of revolutionary. He's something of a visionary of his time where he knows how to place somebody and then pin them down and absolutely interrupt and get to the guts of what he wants to get to. So, which is maybe something you'd see more now. So I think it all happened at the same time is what I want to say.
When you are doing that and you're drawing from your dad to play something, like, did you tell him that that's what you were
I
doing?
still haven't told him. I still haven't told him. He's going to be at a screening, I think, in Dublin, next week with me and myself and Victoria, who plays my wife in the show, who plays Maud. We're opening one of the screenings, and I think we might be doing a Q&A or something, but we'll be around. So I presume he'll figure out then. I kind of think I don't want to ever tell him and just see, will he say something to me? Yeah, I'm just curious to see how it plays out. But no, I have not told him yet.
There are things about all these characters really that you could like, and that there are things not to like about all of these characters too. What do you most enjoy about Declan? Like, what did you most enjoy about playing him and just getting to explore things in his shoes that you wouldn't anywhere else?
Yeah, a good question. I think he's quite a serious guy. Not to say he's not fun or he doesn't get funny or he can't be funny and fun. But I think he wants to be taken seriously in his line of work. He's a journalist. He would consider himself a serious journalist. I mean, if he wasn't presenting a, quote unquote chat show, and he hates that term, I think he'd see himself, he'd like to be on the front line. I think he'd like to see himself as like a war correspondent if he didn't have kids and a family. I think he wants to be out there, and he's always chasing that feeling of recognition is in his own community. I think he wants to be taken seriously, as I said. So that's an interesting kind of a character for me, because it's not really somebody who I am, but I meet people like that. I meet people who are that way, and it's important for them to have that attribute in their character. So that was interesting. He kind of says what's on his mind, and he says it loudly, and he sort of shoots from the hip too. He'll say something and he'll demand something, but he's also, I think he spots people in the room who have the better idea. He's not arrogant in that way. He doesn't want to always, sing from his own hymn sheet. I think if somebody else has the better gig, or the better line, or the better interview, he'll go, or the better idea, he'll go at them. So I quite like that about him too. So yeah, there's lots of aspects of his character, but he's also in this show too. I think something, from reading the first few scripts that I got a real sense of is that he has his own thing. Lots of the characters do have their own thing. In fact, they almost all do, but his one seems quite different. When he's in the TV studio and those weeks I shoot them, I really don't see any of the other actors, so it's a very different thing. And he has his office, and, so there's different worlds. I can nip into the garden parties, but because he's not such a big fan of that, I'm not always involved. So it's nice to kind of dip my toe into the Cotswolds, but then take him out into the more adult world of interviews,
Yeah, I mean, what was it like to do those interview scenes with the back and forth between, the two people on stage, but then also in whatever was going on behind the scenes? What was it like to do? It seems like it would probably have taken quite a while to do all of that.
Yeah. It's strange, because it's as kind of tricky and complicated as you would imagine. There is an earpiece, and the earpiece is working, and we're hearing things, and there's also, it's a real build. So on our studio where Cameron is and the people up in the box, they're really there. So I can see them and they can see me. The set is amazing, actually. It's all built. It's quite brilliant. So yeah, there's a bit of getting used to it, of just who to listen to and where to look. And there are different, and we used real cameras, the real Ikegami cameras, the old BBC cameras from the 80s and the 70s. We had engineers who worked in the 70s and 80s and 90s with these cameras. So they were shooting us on them. So it felt very real. I guess as well, there was an element of, you'd be surprised how much you know already from just watching so many interviews. We've all done it. And when you go to do it, when it's written well, and it was, and it is, it just kind of trips off your tongue. You know the intonation, the flow. It's just there. And you know it when you don't have it. You know when it doesn't sound TV. You know when it doesn't sound like a presenter. It just doesn't sound right in your ear. So you're sort of guided by this knowledge that you've accumulated from spending all these hours, thousands of hours watching television over the last 2 decades. So it's just lodged in there somewhere. And then there's an amalgamation of all these different presenters that you can kind of put together, and you can pick and choose little bits that you like, and some from more contemporary presenters I stole from, and some from some older presenters who aren't around anymore. So it was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea it was so cutthroat and also that like it feels just the success of a show feels like almost life or death in this series. So it's just like the anxiety that comes with watching some of that was I thought it was really fun.
100%, but I totally believe it. It's not like this faux sort of energy that we're trying to drum up for our drama series. I mean, this is independent television in the Cotswolds in 1986. I believe it was like this, and it is cutthroat. If you don't do the job well, next week you might not be on television, or you might not get the franchise, or this is the way TV works. It's everyone's your best friend until they're not.
Yeah. What was it like to sort of develop that little trio that you had with David and Nafessa? And I mean, what was it like to figure out what that dynamic was? Because it is kind of insane.
It is kind of insane. But again, it feels quite real. And maybe it's just us actors who have been in this game a while, albeit not all of us in the 80s. But you see this, I was reading Michael Caine's autobiography recently, What's It All About? And he mentions at one stage, oh no, there was a different book I was reading, sorry. There was another biography of an actor I was reading, and he describes being on set, I think in the 50s, in Hollywood. And he said, he was describing what it's like, and he said, it's like a Shakespearean play. You see every class, you see every level, you see everyone from the runners to the directors and the producers, to the right, you see all the different, the court jesters, to the, who are the actors, to everyone else. You see these different power plays happening, and you see it in our show, and it is life or death for these people. Like they either want to be on television or behind it, and they want to exist in this world, and if you want to be there and around it, you have to work really hard and be popular. So everyone's kind of out to get everyone else. There was something about class somebody mentioned to me too on the show, which I quite like. Somebody said, one of the other actors said, with class, like every character is either trying to improve their class, deny their class, or escape their class. Yeah. I love, everyone's dynamically moving between transactionally, what can I get from somebody else? And if I pay this, what do I need to receive on this end? And, it's interesting. It's a constant. So how do we come up with those scenes and that little trifecta? I guess you just play these things out, you just do. You have this sense and this feeling, and we're all such definitive characters that it sort of just flows.
Yeah, it seemed very fun, but also very fast. I mean, it just seemed like kind of get thrown in the deep end with something like this, and either it works or it doesn't. And it
felt like that to shoot it too. It's funny, you make a show and it doesn't always look like the show you were in, for lots of different reasons. Tonally, you might have had a good time or a bad time, and does it translate, does it not? Our show is pretty straightforward there. It is pretty what's on camera was sort of happening, on set too. It felt like that energy was always there. That fun was there. That sort of like that speed, that we had to get things done and move on, not that we were under pressure, but it was this train that once it took off on the first day, it sort of didn't stop. It was relentless,
This series is also a bit naughty, which makes it even more fun. So when you're doing something like this, I mean, when the sex scenes are as big a part of the story and these characters as they are, I mean, it feels like something that's really kind of almost, you couldn't take it out of the storytelling. So
no.
Was that something that you also took into consideration? Was it important to you that it was part of the storytelling? Like, it never feels disconnected.
No, it doesn't feel disconnected. And it doesn't feel disconnected in the script either, which is quite strange, because I remember reading it kind of thinking, yeah, there is a lot, but it feels justified, and there's so many different types of sex, but so many different types of characters, it's all so different, Maud and Declan's relationship, my character with his wife is, they're in a loving relationship, but she's become despondent because I've given her time. They have an interesting sexual energy, and compared to someone like Tony Baddingham and his wife, or there's so many different, I guess, types of relationships that way. So no, I mean, it read right to me. It tracked when I read it. Some things don't. You might pick up some scripts or read a film script or something where you go, this just doesn't. Why is this happening again? Or why are they specifically want this kind of shot that they're mentioning? Or and it doesn't feel right. There was nothing about the scripts that felt gratuitous or superfluous or something we didn't need, or it felt right. And I think we've been right on that. Like, I've watched the show now, and yeah, there's a lot of sex in it, but it's real good.
Yeah, and it's fun, and it feels like you're learning something from the storytelling of it. I mean, the scene when it cuts to like all the different characters back and forth, even just that, and everybody approaching it differently, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, and just the fact is, and the other thing is that it's transactional, you know, with so many of the characters, you know, it's not that it's not desired or wanted but from them, but they want to do something with it. They're doing it to get something, or, you know, to swap it for something, or there's always a dynamic happening, you know, that it's interesting to see this play out. It's a bit like a Chekhov play, you know, you're constantly going, what's that character doing, and what's that in relationship to this guy, and have we noticed this look? Are they doing something now? There's this world that's created around that sexual energy that I think is really interesting.
Well, the last thing I want to ask you then, I mean, do you know what you're doing next? I feel like I've followed you through these very interesting characters. So do you know what the next one is?
Yeah, well, I'm shooting something at the moment. It's very unfortunate I can't tell you what it is. I mean, I'd love to tell you what it is. It's really interesting, and it's really fun, and I'm having a really good time on it. Oh, that's all I can say it is, you know, but it's it'll be out. I suppose we're having this conversation in the very beginning of October. I think by this time next year, you'll see it.
Well, cool. Something to look out for. So
yeah, really proud. Pretty good.
I appreciate you talking. It's always fun to talk to you about your characters because it feels like there's always a lot to talk about characters.
I go on a bit too much. I know it's late over here. It's getting late. I probably should do probably had too much coffee. Anyway,
It's all good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.